Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of the Weekly Boost podcast. It's just Ben and I this week, unfortunately. However, we have some exciting information coming your way. To start it off, we will talk about a little bit of a brief history of vaccinations and misinformation. We've been seeing a lot in media about some skepticism with individuals and a little bit of a rebirth of an anti-vax movement. Just sort of touch on that and share our opinions. After, we'll get into something a little bit about our semesters, how they're shaping up and ending. Summer's approaching, and that's clearly on our minds right now. It's kind of school is almost to the back burner. And then finally, we'll just finish up on some of the things that we've noticed in the baseball world, because that's all we do, it seems like. But yeah, once again, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for the end of the episode when we talk about some cool stuff coming your way.
Yep.
As you can see, a little sneak peek with what Ben's wearing. But yeah, enjoy this week's episode.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this stuff because obviously I'm taking a course in the history of public health, and there's a lot of things that come up over and over again, even from something like in the Middle Ages, let's say, with quarantine, with the bubonic plague in Europe, and even now, it's just it's really striking to see the similarities in what I'm learning about. Like this week is a book about how public health is and health measures are used to establish racial hierarchies in Los Angeles is what this one is from. I think like 1879 to 1939. I'm just about finished with it. And some of these themes that come up in this anti-vaxxing and this distrust of government and science is something that a lot of cases is unique to the United States. So I don't know if you're entirely aware of that, but it's really striking to see every week when I meet with my professor, it's like connections to today. And
well, I think that uniqueness that we have with this is sort of a representation of how much liberty we have as a citizen in this country, right? We have obviously Bill of Rights that details things that are our unalienable rights and all that sort of stuff. So we have this sort of sense of freedom and this idea that inherently government is there to keep us safe and protect us. And I can see where some people are coming from when it doesn't even have to be associated with vaccines, but there's sort of a mistrust that builds up over time for certain events that go on, either leaked information explains something that the public was lied to about, or kind of the truth came out on its own. We see it over and over again with things that are going on with our country, because we are so, I guess, independent in and we're not free from the hands of government, because obviously right now there's a big, back and forth between how much does the government have the right to interfere with your life or, guide your life. That's one of the driving arguments of our political spectrum today. And we see that constantly, and it's a back and forth thing. But with the vaccines, it's striking because it directly implicates and puts in perspective science and how apparently science is politicized. And I'm sure when the earth was made almost 5 billion years ago, that politics had nothing to do with it, but yet here we are talking about stuff like topics like that and associating them with a blue or red state kind of a thing.
Well, anytime you have when I first entered the class, right, you think, hey, it's public health, like or like health measures, like that's for the good of the people, right? It shouldn't be politicized. On the contrary, I mean, who are the people making those decisions? In our case, it's elected officials or appointed officials for different organizations, right?
Yep.
So to flat out say, like me, the naive Ben at the beginning of the semester, right, says like it shouldn't be politicized, and then you read more and more about it, and it's like without politicization of health measures, things either won't get done or this idea of distrust just grows, and the ties to, like you said, this idea of personal liberty, and that's where I feel a lot of this I don't want to say resurgence of anti-vax, because it's not like it necessarily totally went away, but like this this growing popularity, and I'm looking at this CDC map of estimates of vaccine hesitancy by county for COVID-19 in the United States. And, I've seen the comparisons drawn, this, it's like you said, it's strictly on political bounds, and there's a strong case in the South that has a lot of hesitancy. And you look at
Mhm.
Massachusetts, and every county is at 6%,
Yeah.
and it's just really interesting how time after time public health measures, and a lot of this is seen from the stuff that I'm reading about, where they specifically quarantine a certain group of people. Eastern European Jewish immigrants, for example, was last week's
Hmm.
book. And like the specific racialized quarantines, or framing Chinatown in San Francisco and Los Angeles as, dirty, and just emphasizing how Americanized ways of health and hygiene are like
Yeah.
far superior, and that shows on what they try to educate people on. And it's just, like I said, to say there's that public health measures shouldn't be politicized, or like science shouldn't be politicized, it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
without, like I said, you need leaders to make those decisions.
Mhm.
And if, especially in today's climate in the United States, is there's no way to
Yeah.
do that without any
Yeah. Well,
cohesion.
I'm happy you brought that up about leaders, because I want to talk about leaders for a second. And I'm not just talking about political figures that can kind of contribute to this, but also the social figures that we look up to every day, as people that are either there for forms of entertainment for us, or we use them for outlets, kind of like what we do. Honestly,
Yeah.
it's no different, because we have an audience, and so do these people that proclaim this information that they've received is to be true. But I remember one of the biggest things that I learned about with like the anti-vaccination kind of movement that, comes and goes and sort of stays, in the mist, in the shadows behind of every sort of major, vaccination trial, or, new
Yeah.
emerging disease. It's the celebrity outreach that I think correlates with a lot of the misinformation, because you
Yeah.
have, I don't want to say individuals that idolize celebrities and like the whole celebrity gossip and all that sort of stuff, but people think that getting information from them is an extremely reliable source, and they actually base their life choices on that.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff could be, well, first of all, a lot of the stuff is a very personalized form of an experience, and it's almost as unique as the person experiencing it. And
Mhm.
you look at the probability of it happening to other people. But I just remember a couple of years ago, not a couple, but I think it was like in 2012 or something like that, about MMR vaccinations, measles,
Yeah.
mumps, and rubella having some sort of an association with causing childhood autism.
Yeah.
Um, and then you see the major influx of like investigations and like clinical trials with this sort of stuff, after hearing certain people, proclaim that my child got the MMR vaccine, or my child got this vaccine, and now all of a sudden,
Yeah.
is not, you know, I'm not functioning at a normal level. And, the immediate response is, oh my God, right? Like
Yeah.
this is incredible. Not incredible in the good way, but like, I can't believe this is happening. And then you look into the information and find out that, okay, maybe they were more susceptible, like they actually had it for the longest time, and just, all this sorts of stuff. But I think the celebrity platform that we have offers a lot of valuable information, but at the same time, it detracts from the truth. And
It's the misinformation spreads farther and far more quickly
yeah.
than something else. And everybody, and this gets into another thing I want to talk about with you today, but like it gets into the distrust, that because the government can do one thing that they have to retract on.
Mhm.
Let's say something early on in this pandemic, right? And Dr. Fauci says one thing, and then 6 months later, the science tells him something else, and
Yeah.
he has to change his
But then he looks like,
views.
then he's a bad guy, because he said
Exactly,
information 6 months earlier that was
because
true 6 months earlier.
the public wants this. I don't know if the public necessarily wants this like front that they like can't waver from, but that's not
Yeah.
like how science works, especially in
No.
something that's a new pandemic that's
Yeah.
unfolding before scientists and epidemiologists' eyes, and
Yeah.
ours for that matter. So I just think that these conspiracies that spread so quickly,
Yeah.
and this paper that where this came out that you're talking about, right? This like autism linked to MMR,
Mhm.
the data was fraudulent.
Yeah, it was
like
completely just fraudulent
yeah.
information.
So, but there you go. There's how many people even today that are still hesitant because and think that this is true. Like I don't have a study up in front of me. Like I didn't have a
Yeah,
ton of time for like that sort of stuff because we kind of just brought it up. But
yeah,
the hesitancy of even like pregnant women now too. Um, that and there was just I think there was a paper or an article that published that showed the safety of the vaccine
yeah,
for it, and especially this is super important today given the 11-day pause of the Johnson vaccine
yeah,
that's resuming in the United States,
yeah,
and with the U.S. shipping vaccines or intending to India to help out there because some of the worst outbreak thus far is
yeah,
happening there. Like they're out of medical oxygen, and
yeah.
it's just a really tough scene. Really unfortunate. So,
Well,
but here again, how many people in the United States are? I think I saw Louisiana is not taking their full allotment or not asking for their full allotment of vaccines from the federal
yeah,
government. Kansas the same way. So the rush to vaccinate that we see from the public opinion and support and at the turn of the year, once those get like start rolling out with healthcare
yeah,
professionals and stuff, it's starting to fade. And public health leaders, elected officials, things of that nature are struggling to maintain that level
yeah,
of support. And you even see it. I was watching the news this morning and Ron Johnson said something, well, why should you care if your neighbor doesn't get the vaccine? Like it's none of your business. And there again, like this idea of the greater good. And
yeah,
I don't know if you're familiar with what political affiliation he's with, but the striking nature of party lines that it's falling on is really dangerous.
yeah.
you know
Yeah,
it,
it's the
it, it's
it's
just,
it's amazing that this is something like this is further polarizing our country. It's
mhm.
hard to believe that in a time where people should be coming together, regardless of political affiliation or social class or whatnot, that we decide to let it further divide us
Yeah.
and allow for something that has claimed over 550,000 lives, I think. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not saying for no reason, but honestly, there could have been measures in place that could have
Decrease them. Yeah.
decreased it, obviously, and like we've talked about this before. But I don't remember a time that something like this has happened in the past 10 years where there wasn't some sort of back and forth banter
Yeah.
between the parties. And that hurts to watch as a citizen, because I'd like to say that I'm a pretty middle of the road guy, and I know that you kind of
Yeah.
lean that way too, and that we feel as a population in a country that we have to pick a side. Like
Yeah.
we feel uncomfortable not picking a side. We can't
Well,
be wishy-washy on on topics from the blue or the red. We can't like find a
yeah.
compromise because we have to be associated with
You
the party.
you're yes, absolutely. That's what I was gonna say. You fall into every single category that accompanies
Yeah.
that affiliation.
And like I feel like one of the reasons what we see with the past two presidents, and I'm going to speak on this for both sides, is it was more or less an election for the party in charge rather than what the person is going to do. Like you saw that when Trump was elected in 2016, that he was not even close to the status quo of a conservative elector, or not an elector, but an
Yeah.
electee, like
Yeah.
not even close. But yet he took under the name of being a conservative, and people backed that because they wanted the conservative party to win. They wanted them to be in charge. And the same thing with Biden this past year, the election. People didn't like him, but obviously they wanted the liberal ideology to sort of take
Yeah.
precedence inside government. And it kind of shows now, like we care more about the party and like what that stands for, instead of like being able to actually compromise in the middle and come together and figure out ways to do these things that that could benefit both parties. And I'm not saying that there's
Mhm.
always going to be a happy medium. Like not everything is going to be satisfied by either side when you come together. That's what compromise is about, right? You pick and choose which things that you're
Yeah.
most passionate about, and you just say, hey, these are my my hat, like I need these, and I'm willing to give up these in order to compromise, kind of a thing. And that's how you actually
Yeah.
get stuff done. But unfortunately, we see just changes in the rules of filibusters, the majority, like all these sorts of changes that
Yeah. Or
are trying to just let one side win over the other instead of
or
coming together.
here's a really big one. The idea of packing the courts, expanding the Supreme Court, and
Yeah.
now with DC statehood, or
Yeah.
that vote going to the Senate now,
Yeah.
because you obviously, I mean, you can infer on how it's going to vote,
Yeah.
if it becomes a state.
Yeah.
But it's ironic because it's the same people that speak out about, that like that shouldn't be a state because they know that those senators are going to swing the Senate
One
one
way.
way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and affect the House as well.
Yeah.
But it's the same idea that they don't like, they're getting taxed and they
Yeah.
don't have representation in government.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. It's like something like this pops up, and I think it's only because they feel like they can do it now, right?
Mhm.
With certain people in power. But the it's dangerous too because how many people that don't like religiously check the news, but stay up
Look at
with
it
it
every once in a while.
are
Yeah.
going to be like, oh well, that's just because they're Democrats are in power, they're trying to push that now. And I mean, you have to like
Yeah.
see that too, because where else are they going to do that? Like,
Yeah.
do you think with Trump at the helm, they're going to try to make DC a state, full knowing that it's not going to help their party?
Exactly.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
but the well, let's circle back here to this idea of liberty too, because with health measures and the healthcare system that we have and everything like that, it does come down to this truly American idea of what this liberty thing means, like as a concept. Does that mean that you can't be quarantined because I need to go out and do such and
Mhm.
such, even though it's against the good of the public?
Yeah.
Um, and don't I hate the people that come up to me and like say like, well, quarantine's not even doesn't even work, like stuff like that. Like, come on.
Well,
That's something that with a different type of disease, maybe that's an argument there, but
yeah.
in this case, not so much. But I just even back to like yellow fever in the South
Mhm.
and um, in Philadelphia too, because Philadelphia had I think it was 1793, um, they had an outbreak of yellow fever, and that was a deeply politicized thing.
Mhm.
Hamilton and his Federalists against the Democratic Republicans in Philadelphia, trying to, I think it was the capital at the time. Um,
Yeah. I think so. I think
the
you're right.
it like people were more so trying to call out other parties as opposed to getting containing the outbreak, because
Yeah.
they debated for weeks on end about what the origin of it is. Like, is it a domestic thing that
Uh,
like this idea
I'm
of
happy. Yeah.
miasmas? Yeah,
I'm happy you're
this
bringing this up because I have
yeah,
some
this
good
idea of
thoughts there.
miasmas where it's like the earth just spits out these types of
Yep.
outbreaks and they just happen, as opposed to like an importation thing where ships bring yellow fever, let's say. In yellow fever's case, in the South too, it's like it's kind of a combination sometimes, because in the South, especially because of the climate that's there, they have these seasonal fevers that pop up. It just so happened that in 1793, it had the right ingredients for it to be a big outbreak in
Yeah.
Philadelphia. But it's just the Americanist view that you can't take away my whatever.
Yeah.
It's but it's always going to happen. Like, there's always going to be a deeply political root to that.
Yep.
And I guess I'll shut up. But
No, I'm happy you're talking about this because the entire, first half of the pandemic, it was labeled the China virus, and just that in itself, right there. Now, albeit it, associates some racial, connotations and some stereotypical things that aren't necessarily, politically correct and appropriate, but it also does a really great job of displacing the blame from our response
oh
and
yeah,
focusing upon its origin. And yeah, that's a big part. Ground zero, understanding where ground zero is crucial. Like, I don't know how many of you listening or watching have seen like the movie Outbreak or Contagion, or like these movies. I mean, obviously they're fictional representations of possible real life scenarios, but like understanding ground zero is like one of the most important steps to understanding and how things spread and how to prepare for the next time and all sort of stuff. So part of me gets that, but at the same time, the other part of me is, okay, we understand that it started in China. We understand that it started in, in Wuhan. Okay, let's get over that hurdle instead of labeling it and
yeah.
continuing to, um, I don't want to ostracize China and their involvements because they are not a political ally to us, and because somebody's agenda in office is to stick it to the man that's over there, over across the
Hmm.
Pacific Ocean, kind of a thing. And that hurt because not only I have nowhere near the capacity to understand how this would feel like racially because it wasn't
Yeah.
associated with me, but just that idea that, you're associated with this virus because of, where you're from. Like, that's just, to me, that's like horrible. And like,
Yeah.
they try to raise the counter argument about the Spanish flu. Like, I remember seeing stuff about that. No,
Which
it's like
arguably
because yeah,
originated in the
yeah,
United States,
exactly.
or
Yes,
well,
yeah.
there's the jury's still out on that, but I know what you
But
mean. It's
it
it's dangerous.
it
Yeah.
detracted from, our response. And albeit I don't know how, truthful it is that, the administration beforehand did a complete and not perfect but completely outlined and detailed response to an epidemic or pandemic because of the Ebola outbreak that happened and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
like that kind of, made me distrust a little bit, because if that did exist, then why didn't we use it? Like, was it really because people were, turning their heads to the other party, even though there was something in place for the good of the people?
Yeah.
But
But there again, you're distrusting the government,
yeah,
which you should
exactly.
be.
And it sucks because in the idea of like, founding fathers, but not like the founding fathers of the United States, but founding fathers of modern philosophy and ideology,
Yeah.
like the ideas of classical republicanism and classical liberalism. Obviously, there's two camps to the side. One is, liberty, and the other one is equality. And you can obviously figure out which party identifies that today, but it was always at the expense of togetherness and trying to come
Yeah.
together to solve things. It was never a way to like dissociate. Obviously, you have instances of like the anti-federalist and federalist stuff like all going on, and then you have a little bit more contemporary things about like Civil War, kind of two different camps and like two different venues. But today, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are as close of a representation as we can get to modern philosophical ideologies of the classical and liberalism and
Mhm.
conservatism. And I'm just knowing this from taking a couple philosophy classes here, but the interpretations of what we have now based off that is completely a 180. It's not even close to what it's actually supposed to be. And it's because we've gotten so far this way that we can't, see each other here.
It's really it's makes me anxious thinking about how things can change, because a lot of times people say there has to be some sort of like revolution, or
Yeah.
this two-party system is just, should have listened to George Washington, I guess. But that's another thing. If you aren't familiar, George Washington like had smallpox.
No, I
So
didn't know that.
so like all the portraits you see of him is are historians think kind of are incorrect. Like there would be scarring on his face from
Yeah.
smallpox, and he like underwent this really huge mission to inoculate all of his like the army that was with him,
Mm-hmm.
because he knew how it like affected him, and like
Yeah.
it was a dangerous and time consuming thing, but he knew it was super important, especially given like living conditions in army camps.
Well,
But there again, there's this like this, I didn't really bring it up, but this idea of this great men in science narrative,
yeah.
like Edward Jenner, publishing the first thing about
Vaccines and like,
smallpox
yeah,
vaccines, right?
exactly. Yep.
But milkmaids had been inoculated for years before that. Inoculation, people in China and India
Yeah.
and all over the world are inoculating, but this misconception that only a white man can do it
Yeah.
is what my professor talks to me about. And it makes you think about how history gets told, and who is entitled to what story, and
Yeah.
who, like, the cliche, like history is written by the victors, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really important to like challenge those, and really truly understand. And that's not to take away from like people that have made accomplish or had great accomplishments, but better than I do in science, like how often are you able to like discover something like that just on your own? Like
Yeah.
there's got to be people along the way, right? And this idea of taking all the credit, I think, is problematic too. That's the word of the day.
Yeah. Problematic. Well, it's unfortunate because it's the result of the world that we live in. And you look back
Yeah.
to you obviously have been studying this for a year now, in your graduate studies, but just the evolution of public health. And from I'm just looking at one of the papers that you and I've been passing back and forth, but
Yeah.
just talking about what the world was at 100 years ago, talking about certain governmental institutions and the response as well as the effort to vaccinate people, like for the first time a larger scaled vaccination kind of thing going on, and just understanding that like whether or not it's been written down, like depending on whose story is being told here, but for individuals to trust a vaccine in 1905 or like to be on board with something like that. Now granted, infectious diseases were the number one cause of death for people back then. Like it was, you'd get cholera or you'd get dysentery or like you get all these foreign elements as your cause of death, rather than like today's where it's heart attack, cancer, and like lung disease and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's a good topic to talk about too, is like the shift. There's a reason why infectious diseases are not the number one cause of death anymore, is because of this. But now you look at, well, what's going to be next, because we have the big three now: cancer, heart disease, and lung disease. Not in that order, obviously. I think it's heart disease is still number one, but I
think so.
That shift. But talking about like how the modern hospital in 1905 wasn't even close, like it was just starting to become like where patients were accepted on a normal basis, kind of a thing. People were still getting sent to mental asylums for depression, like anxiety, like these things. Like you realize the society that we've grown up in, and the society that was 100 years ago, completely different, but they're still facing these same sorts of problems. And it's ironic that
I would point you to, I'm gonna read this, not part of my course. There's like so many books that I've like come across that I want to read now, but like there's only what two weeks left in this or 3 including exams. Like don't get me started on that. But this decision, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that was made in 1905. It went to the Supreme Court, and basically the decision upheld the authority of states to enforce compulsory vaccination laws, so long as they don't exceed what does it say? Go so far beyond what was reasonably required for the safety of the public. So here's a really big setback to that liberty argument in 1905. The progressive era is getting underway after all the industrialization and beginning to, once smallpox gets eradicated and like you said, shifting towards like more internalized issues.
Stuff that we necessarily could have control over. I'm not saying that
somewhat,
like I'm making a big case for washing your hands can prevent infectious diseases, but washing your hands or getting a vaccine doesn't necessarily prevent you from heart disease. Like it's sort of a lifestyle, a choice of a lifestyle that gives you that. Obviously there's genetic, predisposition for that, but you see, like the United States, for example, is, the leader in obese people per capita, like the percentage of that stuff, like too, with like how our health and our lifestyles have declined, whereas you see in other parts of the world increasing. And then obviously you have the conversation of, well, America's still the best because of this. Well, is it really, when you have X amount of people dying every day of a heart attack because we pack our foods with preservatives and all that sort of stuff? Like, I'm sure when preservatives were invented, everybody was like, this is amazing because we can store food for the long run and have it on shelf life, increased shelf life. Well, 40 years from the invention of a preservative, well, look at what it's doing now. It's the number one. Like you get like all this bad stuff. Well, yeah, it was great in the limelight then, but looking at it now,
it's also tell me if you heard this before though. Health is nature's greatest safeguard against disease, and that therefore no state has the right to demand of anyone the impairment of his or her health. So 3 years after this decision in 1905, the Anti-Vaccination League of America gets founded under that principle that I just said. And they just were weary of the progressive ideals, letting government and science into private life. And that's scary too. Like what the government is capable of at keeping track of its citizens and things like that. So that's why something like this never really goes away. But even during this pandemic, the courts relied on this decision. So it's I don't know. It's we're not going to get anywhere talking about it. I just think it's important to talk about it and realize. This is why I'm super interested in what I am now. Like realizing the roots of some of these ideological differences and how they get portrayed into public health public health measures and other things. So
Thank you for coming back after the break. After that sort of, back and forth argument about, political kind of impositions and stuff like that. But a little bit more, I guess, personal topics, kind of what's going on in our lives and kind of stuff to look forward to. As you may be aware, it is April when we're filming this, and it's going to be April when this releases. But our semesters are ending pretty soon. And for me, it means, graduation in about 3 weeks. And for Ben, it means, trying to retain, some sort of summer understanding of his schooling. He can talk more about that because I'm still unsure about how the whole graduate, semesters end and stuff like that, if they're different. But it's been let's just say it's been a weird semester, a weird year. I don't know if that kind of fits with a lot of people that are students that listen, but for my school, it was a return to full in person. Obviously, option for online learning, which I don't necessarily like, but it was the cards that we were dealt with, and we did our best at that. But I just want to take a moment to talk about the importance of that in-person communication that we experience in the classroom. And I'm sure you're aware of this when you go to your classes and like when you've done some substitute teaching, stuff like that. But just how taken for granted it has been to be able to sit at a desk and understand and listen to a professor or teacher explain their mastery of a subject or their newfound knowledge of a subject. Like they may not be the masters at it, like they might not have a PhD in front of their name, but they have some valuable insight to something. And for me, that's invaluable because I have to be in person, or I have to either do it or just like be there for when I'm learning this sort of stuff. And the online transition was awful for me because I felt as if I was stuck in this little, rectangle labyrinth of like the internet where I had to learn by, pure like visualization rather than me actually being able to do it in person. And I think that actually helped out a lot this ending semester, finishing up my undergraduate studies. It's just being able to sit in front of a professor with a chalkboard or a whiteboard and have them just talk. And now granted, there's obviously, the precautions that have been implemented and stuff like that, but it's just, it was weird. And I don't think hopefully there's not going to be another semester like these past two. I hope that, there's, brighter days ahead. Obviously there will be, but that's how my semester ended.
I had one in-person class, but even like my first semester of graduate school, it's weird when you can't like interact with your classmates in person, especially like me being out of academia and classes for a year and a half. It was hard to jump into a Zoom world. When do you unmute? Like, do you raise your hand function, or do you like actually raise your hand and hope that your professor sees you? Do you like interrupt them, like not interrupt, but like join in without like being told that like to unmute? Like what's the etiquette there? And you spend so much time in your apartment or your dorm room, right? And then to have to take a class. Like for me, I have a 1-bedroom apartment. Like where else am I going to, sit and do the class, right? Am I going to go to the library and sit in the basement? Probably not. I did that a couple times, but you sit at your desk and you try to tune out everything around you, and even so, that's hard. Like there's distractions. There's things going on, and so you're absolutely right.
Because it's your room. It's not not a classroom. Like the classroom is dedicated for that.
Exactly.
And like the
classroom.
The taken for granted part of that it reigns true every time because you never realize how actually nice and just comforting it is to have a place dedicated for learning, rather than like I'm sitting in my room right now where I have my TV behind me, I have like my computer in front of me, I have like my bed. Like I'd much rather want to lay in bed and do my class rather than be attentive and take notes and stuff like that. Like obviously that's an inherently human choice.
It's
like,
you have to physically living.
You have to physically choose to not do that when you're in your room rather than when you're in a classroom. You don't have that choice, and I think not having that choice makes the learning environment much more efficient, in my opinion.
For sure. So next semester is looking like it's going to be all in person, so that'll be nice to actually get that feel. But I got a 24-page paper, a 12 to 14-page paper, and then another final paper. So it's
yikes.
Yeah, yikes is right.
But
So this is my last like weekend of not writing until my fingers
yeah,
fall off. So or typing. So that's what I'm gonna be doing next weekend. But um, yeah, I'm waiting to hear back on some things and planning out my summer and
yeah.
staying disciplined with it, because I feel like even in the summer you kind of can drift from what you
Oh
want to
man,
do.
I'm the biggest summer drifter ever. I have so many
Yeah.
plans going into summer, and then I'm like, yeah,
And then
it's
it's
summer.
end of July and you're like,
Yeah,
oh, I got 4 weeks until the next semester. What should I do? And
yeah.
you try to pack everything. Well,
Well,
usually there's like baseball for me with like the A's.
oh yeah, yeah,
It was from May to August basically,
yeah.
and June and
Every
July were
day, yeah,
nonstop every day. So there was a bit of a schedule
yeah.
to my days, but yeah, I'm excited to wrap it up and
Yeah. Hey, for
I have
all
to
those
read
out
three
there,
books a week. Yeah.
yeah, for all those out there that are going, finishing up their semesters or that have recently finished up their semesters, just keep grinding. It's tough. Like I've been checked out for a while now, and it's hard to want to like go to the classroom and stuff, because it's just you're so close to the finish line that you can see it, and you can hear everybody cheering you on all the way. But it's just a good reminder that you can accomplish stuff even if the world itself tells you stop, right? Like you're able to get a degree, or you're able to get a job or move to a place 1,000 miles away. Like you can do it. It's just you gotta just overcome that adversity some way somehow. And there's your little weekly boost segment right there.
I'm gonna stay away from the Mandela effect that I want to talk to you, because I saw a video that really freaked me out.
Yeah, I bet.
Recently, that I was kind of like, oh really? Like, yeah, we'll say that for a different day.
Yeah, that could be a different one.
But I'm watching, obviously playing the show, right? It's, that's a sore subject, I guess. But
Yeah.
I'm watching the Dodgers Padres, and Sunday Night Baseball's on right now. And Tatis hit another one.
Yeah.
But last night, I sent this to you. I don't know if you had time to look at it, but the Trevor Bauer Tatis stuff.
Yeah, the one-eyed closed thing.
Yeah, and then that was in like spring training, and he had that in his back pocket, and he trolls him again and does his like K strut after he crosses home plate the second time, I believe.
Yeah.
There's notions of him like checking back for the sign, and he didn't. I looked at it. He didn't see the numbers, but he saw like the shoulders move. They're saying, so he knew it was gonna be outside. But the pitch he hit out, if you're following and can. Remember that was 3, 4, 5 inches outside off the plate.
Yeah, it was
like a cutter off the plate. Yeah, and he pulls it to left.
Yeah,
like the power to just do that, right, is incredible too. But this is kind of where I want to go with this. Like, where do you stand on this idea of traditional versus new age baseball? Because seeing something like that, like 4 years ago, Ben would be like, that's stupid. Like, they don't need this like beef on Twitter and like all this crap, like stay professional and move forward. But that's not the world that we live in.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy you asked this question, and I didn't know that we were going to talk about this, but I'm happy you brought it up. I'm thinking back, because I've seen all this beef with Tatis a while ago when he hit that grand slam last year. Yeah. Kind of when it was a blow-away game. Like there was nobody had any business pimping a home run like that, but he did. And you know what? Good for him. I think about it as this: you go out there and you battle, right? It's a battle between two teams, right? I was taught to never let up, because that's when you let the bad teams catch up, and then it makes the game a hell of a lot more difficult to play and to have fun with. And so, like, good for Tatis for hitting that grand slam like last year, and like doing his thing. Like, don't throw a baseball down the middle. Like you do your job as a pitcher and sort of put out your best effort.
No free outs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like, okay, because you're losing by 12 means he has to ground out to the shortstop.
Yeah, like
means that he has to strike out on 3 pitches right down the middle. Like what? Yeah. Like that's just, I think that's a weak-minded approach to baseball. And like now, if he ever sees this and like comes at it, like, no, you have to go out there and you're not going to get any freebies unless they literally hit you on the first pitch, or you walk on 4 straight. Like those are the freebies that I'm talking about. But like
that's where baseball's nice too. Like it's going to be 1v1 to the end, like end of 9 or 7 if it's a 10-run rule.
But with that traditional progressive kind of like that, the back and forth,
the
like for
exciting,
me for me as a pitcher, when I know it was different when I played, because I was kind of like, okay, give me the ball. I want to throw. Like, I don't think about it too much. Like, okay, if the dude tanks one off the Wilmore Center off of me, That's on me. Like I can't be, it has happened. Ben was on the team when it happened. But like you can't be mad at that other player for doing their job for, like,
Oh, I'd be mad.
But I'd be mad at myself for being like, hey, I gave up here's an 80 poo fastball right down the middle. I'll see you later.
Nice. Must be nice.
That wasn't what I was at, but I just think that there's kind of like, I feel like there's a little bit of entitlement with baseball nowadays. Like the idea that you have the right to get offended because a guy hit a home run or because he took a little bit longer to round the bases. Like, if we're trying to have a game that lasts as long as possible and try to increase longevity in the audience approach, you have to do something different because it isn't 1940. You don't have like the people that come to the game and just come for it for the love of the game, because you got guys like Mantle playing, you got, Willie Mays playing, these people that everybody wants to come watch because they love baseball. Nowadays it's, oh, baseball's on. Okay, well, the NBA is playing too. Okay, NHL is on too. Like, there's so much access to this stuff online that it completely, detracts from the idea that this game is like, it not only is it a livelihood for these players, but way back then it was like the only thing, like it for these people. And so I think it's just people are getting a little bit too caught up in the idea that, oh my God, he took an extra 3 seconds to round. Or he's making eye contact after he hit a ball 450 feet. Or, hey, I just struck you out with the nastiest slider ever throw. I'm going to get a little fired up.
Yeah.
Sorry for showing emotion. I don't know, we're robots, right? Because when we turn into robots in baseball, like what they're talking about with umpires nowadays, how about eliminating umpires? I don't know if you've seen that in like some East Coast leagues and stuff where they do all their experiments. Like they've put the mound back another foot to allow more offense, to make it more fun, eliminate the home umpire in order to, reduce the amount of, bad calls or whatever. Like, okay, that's part of the game. Like that part's part of the game. But like when you get upset about players showing emotion in like the right way, about like being empathetic about like what they just did, that hurts me, because like I was 2 outs away from a no-hitter. You can't tell me that I'm not gonna get fired up with my team. I'm not gonna like get pumped. Or I've never, believe it or not, fun fact, I've never hit a home run in my entire baseball career. I'm sure if I would have hit one, I would have wanted to take the time to say, I'm going to admire it a little bit. Now, granted, I could expect a fastball a little up and in the next at bat, because that's an unwritten rule of baseball. But the unwritten rules of baseball, obviously, they need to change a little bit too, because that's where a lot of this comes from.
A lot of the things that need to change, and I think they're making the right steps. They're having better quality content, even with like the 8K stuff that you see, like you saw in the NFL this year. You're seeing it in MLB about like home runs and getting better access, but it doesn't stop there. Like the blackouts need to stop. And, the average age of the fan base, it keeps growing, in order to grow the sport. I think as much as I hate to say it, you need these like Twitter feuds between, Trevor Bauer and Tatis.
Because what are kids like you and I do, like our age we're on Twitter. We see this stuff. We see Bauer and Tatis going at it. We're like, maybe I'll check into the next Dodger Padres game. Yeah. Because I want to see this go down. Maybe I'll look at when, it's the rubber match, Bauer's on the mound and you got Darvish or something like that. Like, all right, let's see it.
Yeah. And I think that Dodgers Padres, as much as you'd hate to keep seeing them blowing them up on Instagram about it, or even me, like the amount of Cubs content there is on the MLB account, like obviously for you it's fine, but
I'm indifferent on it. I actually see that they kind of,
but you know what I mean, like why are we blowing up Javi Baez swinging from the left side on a flyout off of a positional when there's,
you want to know why? Because they're trying to bring more fun to the game.
Exactly.
They're trying to say
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's the game of baseball has been changing. It still needs to change. I think it's still ahead of the NHL. That is a traditional league.
That is very traditional.
You have I won't get into that, but it's just like for me, I would never dream to do a K strut after getting a guy on a slider. You know what I mean? Like I just that's just not like who I am. But in today's like culture, there's so many more people that are so apt to bat flip, let's say, or do that. Like I think showing emotion in the right way is really important to the game. Like as a player, it shows that you're like passionate about it. And like when I've had bad outings on the mound, like if anybody knows me, like but like the excess stuff, I think is just I don't know. I feel like it just
You're
like
no,
floods
you're
tweets too
exactly
much.
right. You're right about the extremes, right? And I think obviously with anything, extremes are bad. Like you look
Yeah,
at,
that's true.
like when you're growing up in little league and you have your coaches, like, you always had the one kid, and like maybe we were kids like this, but like that would get overly upset about an outcome of like the game, right? Like
Been
you'd
there.
have somebody like throw a bat because they struck out, or like a helmet. Like you see these things growing up, and you're like, obviously that's not the correct emotional response, and like
Yeah.
you're unconsciously taught that, as well as told that by your coaches and your fans, family, whatever, right? And so you see that sort of transition nowadays. You see obviously the pretty big name players getting frustrated throwing their bats and stuff like that, and like that to me detracts from the game a little bit, like that negative emotion. But like when the positive stuff happens, like I mean, you walk off right in the ninth inning, bottom of the ninth, winning run on second, you hit a single in the gap, and you see everybody charging out there to go hug the dude on first base. That's positive emotion to me. But you have the people cracking helmets on the concrete, or breaking bats, or like blowing up
Or breaking
Gatorade.
their nose after a
Yeah.
helmet smash that happened in summer ball.
Yeah, it's. I want to have my words carefully come out here, because it's kind of towing a fine line, but there's extremes to it. And I feel like modern baseball, contemporary baseball, is doing an actually better job of towing the extremes with the positive emotions and the negative emotions. Because I'm going to tell you right now, watching old footage like 1980s, if somebody hit just absolutely smashed a home run off a guy, his next at bat, he's getting a fastball to the chin, or he's getting a fastball to the back, and then a fight ensues. Like it's almost like every time, because it's just like, oh, you're trying to one up me. Isn't that the point? Isn't that the point of competition? And now, but obviously there's times where like you see the stuff with like what happened with Wilson Contreras the other day, like where he for no reason, that one he watched it a little too long, and then Tapara throws and then Tapara throws behind a pitcher for absolutely no reason. Like you see that stuff,
and they admitted, they're like, yeah, we shouldn't have tried to hit their pitcher at
Woodruff. Yeah, we should have tried to hit it's hard, but it's in the right direction, because I'm gonna be honest, it's more fun watching this dude slowly trot around the bases after like he hit a grand slam, or like seeing this pitcher get all fired up for striking out the side with the bases loaded, no outs, kind of thing.
It gets you mad too, right? Like if you're a Brewer fan, let's say, watching Wilson Contreras, like how many people tweeted about that?
Oh, a lot. I opened my Twitter
exactly. So more people are talking about the game, and that FOMO kicks in, and people are like, oh, what are they talking about? And they go check it out, and more people are exposed to baseball. And I think it's a good stepping stone for the game. But again, like nothing's perfect, like the MLB, the show servers. So
those are terrible.
They'll hopefully those are fixed soon, and I need some break from reading. But
bottom line, like everything, baseball is an like ever evolving kind of thing that we go through, and the traditional stuff is important, right? Like there are unwritten rules, I think, that
you respect the game,
right? Yeah, it's respecting the game, and like but there has to be leniency for the raw emotion of players. Like it's just like you can't go out there and expect them to be robots, or you can't go out there and always expect retaliation, because it's just that's not what the game calls for right now. We need more people to watch the game in order for it to survive, because look at what the NFL is doing. Like now, granted, the Nickelodeon collaboration was kind of up in the air stuff, but it was different. And you want to know how many times people were talking about it?
Mitch Trubisky got a lot of publicity for that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was a strong case for any publicity is good publicity kind of a thing. Like no matter how bad this collaboration was, people tuned in to want to see how bad it was.
Exactly.
Now with baseball, like, okay, you see Tatis and Bauer going back and forth. It's not as severe as Nickelodeon. He's squirting slime in the end zone on a touchdown, but like it does something to the sport that you couldn't have done 20 years ago, because Twitter wasn't around, because there wasn't this outlet for people to see this sort of beef.
And I did watch most of the Bauer like response video where he's rating the celebrations. And it seems like it's all in good fun with him, right? And he's doing a lot to grow the game.
He's a goofy guy on his own too. He knows that it's a game, but he also gets fired up like everybody else.
But again, like sailing the baseball over the batter's eye in center field, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
even he's got to like toil with those like
Yeah.
containment of emotion and
Yeah.
you know, and there again, it's a good representation of, you know, staying emotionally. Or I think Liamba said this where instead of staying like even keel the whole time, I know you were sick during it, but like enjoy the highs and embrace the lows so you appreciate it more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you appreciate the bases loaded, no outs, getting
Yeah.
out of the inning where you get a strikeout and then a double play ball. Because like I feel like I've been there before and it's a great feeling.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then also like pitching 5 innings in relief and giving up a walk off home run, not so much. You know,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
like you just gotta embrace that, and
Well,
sometimes it's baseball's a really good metaphor to, you know, humble
yeah.
you real quick.
Yeah,
So
and last thing about it, I'm just going to talk. I'm happy you talked about the highs and lows, but we tend to focus too much on our successes that we fail to realize that failures actually teach us more, and they drive us more. And so, if I'm going to give up, a double off the fence, well, hey, like, okay, let's not throw that pitch to that guy next time. Rather, if I strike the dude out on 3 straight pitches, it's like, okay, is that because I was better, or is that because like, he just wasn't good? Like,
yeah, what do you necessarily learn from that?
yeah,
At
like,
bat,
okay,
you know?
okay, I got him out with 3 straight. Like, what do I do the next time? I don't know. But like with that failure, that this is a really hard example to relate to this. But like with that failure, you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to throw him this, or this. Let's do something different. And if he hits it again, well, I need to get better. Like,
Yeah.
I need to get better to get him out. I feel like the failures in the game of baseball, like with life, we talk about this a lot, but like with life, you learn so much more from when you're, I don't want to say down in the dumps, but when, you have your 0 for 4 games, when you have your back-to-back home run let up games, like you learn from that more than you do. I struck out the side. Like, okay, does that mean your stuff was good, or was, did you get a good call from the umpire? Like what does that mean for you? Like, how do you learn from that?
Yeah, I think that's even what makes starting pitchers, and especially Jacob deGrom, like right now, so much more special in what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, being able to get guys out 3 times through the order is, especially a major league hitter, that's crazy. But all right, well, before we end, let's talk about this next month so we can kind of clip this and use this as our promotional for it. So if you haven't heard, again, we've been trying to, lead up to it. We partner with American Cancer Society. We have a fundraiser. It's a GoFundMe ready to go that benefits a division in Wisconsin of the American Cancer Society, I believe, promoting cancer research efforts.
Yeah, the money goes directly to research efforts, which is one thing that we really wanted to make sure was, emphasized with this. So
that's why we wanted to do it in May too. Like it splits up other opportunities for us, but more importantly, like especially with the pandemic, and we touched on it before, like cancer research is really kind of as with other things, like they were in danger of losing their program at one point. So I think it's really important to do what we can. That's why we also created these shirts. Thanks, Oklahoma Shirt Company. Really
awesome.
cool logo. One of our friends came up with that logo, and then they were able to merge it with American Cancer Society. So those are $20 a piece. If you want them, message us on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Email us at weeklywoozpod@gmail.com. Whatever you can to get to us, and we'll set up a Venmo. You can send it to. It's $20 and it's landed, so we'll ship it to you.
They're going fast too, so if you do want them, try to get your hands on them, because they're cool, and they're for a great cause. You mentioned this, but the amount of effort that it goes into the whole funding for American Cancer Society and all that sort of stuff, we couldn't do it without Andrew and Casey. They were amazing people to work with. We're still working with them today, and we know hopefully you guys are listening to this, but we just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to do this, because it's something that Ben and I are obviously both really passionate about. And Ben said it best. This past year really showed us that as good as we think we are at being able to provide for people that are going through it, it always can be better. And the difficulty with getting access to the treatment and stuff like that, and obviously with the pandemic and closing down a lot of clinics and stuff like that, or revamping clinics for other sorts of things, cancer treatment was difficult to do, and we saw a lot of negative connotation with that, as well as just poor performance of treatments, as well as higher statistics associated with the bad parts of cancer. So it's important that we do our part, and we're excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, I'm excited, and like we said, $20 and we'll ship them to you. And we're not taking anything from the shirts, are we? Or it's minimal?
I don't think
just
it's
to cover
very minimal,
shipping and production costs. So
whatever you guys do with the shirts is what we're putting into on top of other donations from us, but it's what we're putting in there. So.
I think we're going to change our link in bio too in May, so it'll be easier to access the fundraiser that way. So be on the lookout for that. We'll share some research projects the American Cancer Society has funded. We're going to have Cassidy back on. That's really exciting. And then kind of show how cancer is and racial equity and in research and medical care. So be on the lookout for that. Other than that, have a great week. Yeah.
Thanks again for tuning in. Bye, guys.